Hi, this is Sandra on the Bible Talk Show today, bringing you another book in the Bible, the book of Ephesians. It's on God's love and God's judgment. We're going to take a look at some of the scriptures on God's love and some of the scriptures in this book on God's judgment. All right, let's get started. All right, a summary of this book. The book of Ephesians is a letter written by the Apostle Paul to the Christians in Ephesus. It's rich with theology and practical advice for living a Christ-centered life. Here's a brief summary. In chapters 1 through 3, you're going to see this. You're going to see doctrine and identity. In Christ, Paul begins it with highlighting the spiritual blessings believers have in Christ, emphasizing God's plan of salvation and the unity of the church. He discusses how believers are saved by grace through faith, not by their works, and how they are now part of God's family. In chapters 4 through 6, the practical application. Paul shifts focus to how believers should live as a response to their new identity. He encourages unity, love, and moral purity, giving specific instructions for relationships, marriages, families, and workplaces. He ends with a call to spiritual strength, urging believers to put on the armor of God to stand firm against spiritual challenges. So in Ephesians, it is a powerful reminder of God's grace, the importance of unity, and how faith shapes every aspect of your life. Okay? All right. Let's take a look at some scriptures of God's love. The book of Ephesians is filled with beautiful expressions of God's love. All right, let's take a look at a few. In Ephesians 1, 4, 5, 4 verse 4 and 5, it says, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ, in accordance with his pleasure and will." This verse emphasizes God's loving plan for believers, choosing and adopting them into his family. And then Ephesians 2, 4 through 5, "But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions, sinners. It is by grace you have been saved." It speaks of God's immense love and mercy, bringing salvation through grace. And in Ephesians 3, verse 17 through 19, "And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God." And Paul's prayer here beautifully illustrates the vastness of Christ's love for us. God is pure love, as is his Son. Ephesians 5, 1, verse 1 through 2. "Follow God's example. Therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." This reminds believers to reflect God's love in their lives, just as Christ demonstrated his love through his sacrifice. All right, so these verses showcase how God's love is foundational to the message of Ephesians, inspiring and transforming lives. Wow. Okay, now we're going to look at God's judgment, some scriptures. So this theme of God's love is prevalent in Ephesians, but the book also touches on God's judgment, particularly as a warning against sin and disobedience. Here are key scriptures that reference God's judgment. Ephesians 2, verse 1 through 3. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, which is Satan. All of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts, like the rest. We were by nature deserving of wrath. This verse speaks of humanity's sinful nature and the just wrath of God before salvation through Christ. So, the people who do not believe in Christ, there will be a wrath, there will be a judgment for the wicked, and the righteous that gave their life to Jesus will be saved, as they are already. Okay? Ephesians chapter 5, verses 5 and 6. For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. And here Paul warns believers of God's judgment on those who live in persistent disobedience and sin. And then Ephesians chapter 4, verse 18 and 19. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. And this verse highlights the consequences of being spiritually hardened, leading to separation from God. Ephesians balances these warnings with the overwhelming hope and grace offered to believers. God's judgment is portrayed not as arbitrary, but as just and rooted in his holiness. Okay. So it's a righteous judgment. Okay. Conclusion of the book of Ephesians. The conclusion of the book of Ephesians, found in Ephesians 6:21 through 24, encapsulates Paul's heartfelt care for the believers and his desire for them to experience God's peace and grace. He wraps up the letter by introducing Tychicus, and forgive me for saying that incorrectly, his trusted companion, who will inform the Ephesians about Paul's situation and encourage their hearts. The final verses offers blessings of peace, love, and grace to all who have an unwavering love for Jesus Christ. This closing reflects Paul's pastoral heart and his emphasis on building unity and faith among believers. It serves as a warm and a personal ending to a letter full of profound truths and practical teachings. What stands out most to you in this book of Ephesians? It's theology, it's practical advice, or something else entirely. So hopefully if you read this whole book of Ephesians, this will educate you on God's love and God's judgments and what we should be doing in our life today as it is. All right. Thank you for watching. My name is Sandra. You can reach me at this email address. And don't forget to watch us on the Bible Talk Show and the YouTube channel. We have over 1,000 videos for you to review and different lessons that we have put together over the years. God bless and come back again.